Hey, good morning. Here we are again, real raw and recovered. My name is Bobo. I'm a recovered addict and alcoholic. When we left off last recording or last upload, we left off on step one. Now, I'd like to take the opportunity to try to expound expound on the step two experience, right? So, step two is came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. But we've got to back up into a recap of step one to get some momentum because everything hinges upon the realization of the step one truth. I have to have a solid step one or nothing else will matter. So, to recap on the step one experience, we have a situation of mind and body. The real addict and the real alcoholic has so changed his body, damaged his mind, that nothing apart from divine help, from a divine experience, a spiritual awakening, a psychic change can help him, can get him recovered, can solve his problem. Uh, so Powerlessness is speaking about the thing that has happened to my body from continued use and abuse. Now my body has an allergy to these substances, and it is expressed in the phenomenon of a craving that would supersede my mental capacity to control. In other words, I'm completely powerless over what would happen if I put the chemicals into my body. I am so powerless over what would happen that it is irrelevant as to how close I think I am to God. There is no spiritual awakening or spiritual experience would make me that would make me able to successfully use without having a phenomenon of craving, without having this allergy. Uh, I don't care how long I'm sober. I can never again use, control, and enjoy. I can never again avoid being allergic. I can't even avoid being allergic if the doctor, for very good reason, prescribes me something. I'm going to have an allergic reaction to the chemicals and a phenomenon of craving. And it's very possible and even likely that I'll follow the cycle once again. The cycle, if I could get this up here on this screen, looks like this. Let me see here. All right. So here is the first use. Here is the allergy. I'm coming around the cycle. Here is the well-known stages of a spree. And here is usually where the consequences happen: the intervention, the jail, the overdose, the emerge remorseful. Sometimes I emerge remorseful and I don't make a firm resolution. Sometimes I emerge remorseful and what I do is I try to do as much fucking dope as I can to keep from feeling it or thinking about it. Then, after the firm resolution, meaning after I have done what it takes to stay stopped, swear off, or something like that, then my real problem, my ism, my dis-ease, my restless, irritable discontentedness that not okay in my own skin is exposed. It's here now. I feel it. even though outside things may be looking up and looking bright. I feel it now. I'm not okay because the sense of ease and comfort that came at once by taking a few drinks has become my norm as to how I could deal with the inner turmoil I've been experiencing. The sicker the person is, the more alcoholic or addict the person is, the less time he could abide in the restless, irritable, and discontent. And according to the individual, these things vary. I personally can't take being restless, irritable, and discontented much longer than a day or two. The big book says on page 24 that they can't bring into their consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week ago. At certain times, and so in that pain of the current of the now and not comfortable in my own skin, I'll begin to romance the only sense of ease and comfort I've ever known, or that I've come to know as the norm. And so I return to the obsession. And in the obsession is the battlefield of choosing to or not to. Is a losing battle. I've lost the power of choice. So once I make it to the obsession, chances is I'm going to use again because I'm in so much pain, I have no choice. This pain also erases the potency of how bad things had gotten in the past. So the defense that would keep one from putting his hand on a hot stove, I no longer have. So the body is the part that, the powerless part is the body. It's the thing that has happened to my body that no matter what will stay the same. I will always be allergic. The biggest part, the problem centering in the mind rather than in the body, is the spiritual malady. The inability to manage, or the unmanageableness of step one, is I cannot manage the decision to stay stopped because I can't manage to be happy and okay in my own skin by my own efforts and means. And the pain makes me unable to manage to avoid using again. So this is the unmanageable part of the mind over here, and that's the spiritual malady, and that's the part that declares me, if in fact I'm a real addict and alcoholic, it declares me completely fucked, unless 2 through 12, unless I can get in touch with a power greater than myself, which would solve my problem. Page 45, lack of power. That's my dilemma. I have no power over this cycle. Once I am that for the rest of my life. And the biggest part of the problem centers in the mind rather than in his body, and that's a thing that only a power greater than myself can restore or can make right. When Bill was approached by Abby Thatcher with the 6-step program of the Oxford group, the 6 steps were concentrated, thick. They were heavy. They were 1, complete deflation; 2, dependence on God; 3, moral inventory; 4, confession; 5, restitution; and 6, continue work with others. So we're still at the point of complete deflation. And so with time and experience, Bill and Bob and the first 100 to recover realized over a period of time in their experience, realized that these needed to be broken down into smaller, more consumable steps. And so there spawned the 12 steps, which had a far better success rate and a lasting success rate. The success rate of Alcoholics Anonymous, as we know it nowadays, success rate sucks in comparison to the success rate in the 40s and 50s. And the truth is, it's probably because we no longer follow the precise instructions as outlined in the book. But I want to get into step 2. Came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. And I'm going to tell you ahead of time, I'm going to have to talk a little bit about religion. Not religiously as to try to push my own religious beliefs, but to expose some of the lies we cling to, which is proof that I have still not had a complete deflation, which is proof that I still do not have a solid step 1 experience. And so some of the things I've got to say might disturb you. I look forward to disturbing you with truth. What I don't want is you to shut down and not be receptive and seriously consider what's being said, because I hope to be helpful. I believe that's the only reason I'm alive, the only reason God, as I understand Him, saved me from my self-imposed crisis. So let's get started. So let's take a look at Dr. Bob's story on page 181. Dr. Bob's story on page 181. At the very end of his story, at the very end, the last paragraph of his story. It says, if you think you are an atheist, an agnostic, a skeptic, or have any other form of intellectual pride which keeps you from accepting what is in this book, I feel sorry for you. If you still think you are strong enough to beat the game alone, that's your affair. But if you really and truly want to quit drinking and using liquor for good and all, and sincerely feel you must have some help, we know that we have an answer for you. It never fails. If you go about it with 1/2 the zeal you have been in the habit of showing when we were getting another drink. So right away, we want to get right into a conversation with the intellectual, with the skeptic, with the agnostic, and the atheist. Because you're very smart people. You're very intelligent. You pick up things quick. And you're still a failure. You still, with all your brilliance, have no ability on your own, all by yourself, to get sober, stay sober, and be okay sober. And so the deflation that should come from having all of the truths of the step 1 should have whooped the person into a state of reasonableness. Meaning, hell, I realize that I'm fucked if I don't seriously consider this higher power concept. Everything I've tried on my own, as brilliant and as intelligent as I am has failed. And finally, here's someone who has information about what's been going on with me in my inner person, that thing which I have never been able to relate to a normal person who doesn't have the same experience with alcoholism and addiction. I've never been able to get it across to them. And here is a person who has had the same experience and who has found a solution, saying that a power greater than themselves is what worked. Right? Now, let's challenge some of these beliefs. Let's talk about uh, Bill for a minute. Bill's story, page 10. All right. Yes, sir. Bill says on page 10, he says, I had always believed in a power greater than myself. I had often pondered these things. I was not an atheist. Few people really are, for that means blind faith in the strange proposition that this universe originated in a of cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. My intellectual heroes, the chemists, yeah, people who are smarter than you, the astronomers, even the evolutionists suggest vast laws and forces at work. Despite contrary indications, I had little doubt that a mighty purpose and rhythm underlay it all. How could there be so much of precise, immutable law and no intelligence? Huh? I simply had to believe in the spirit of the universe who knew neither time nor limitations, but that was as far as I had gone. With ministers and the world's religions, I parted right there. When they talked of a God personal to me who was love, superhuman strength, and direction, I became irritated and my mind snapped shut against such a theory. To Christ, I conceded the certainty of a great man, not too closely followed by those who claimed him, his moral teachings most excellent. For myself, I had adopted those parts which seemed convenient and not too difficult. The rest I disregarded. So here we are. More times than not, a person of great intelligence, high IQ, simply meaning that they understand things quickly. It's the rate of speed in which you can figure it out, is what an IQ is. It doesn't really mean you know anything valid. It just means that you collect information and surmise quickly, is what a high IQ infers. And so, let's get real. I have never once seen anything explode and something fucking came to life afterwards. It just sounds completely fucking dumb. As brilliant as the Bang Theory might sound, it also sounds completely fucking stupid. That everything is happening for no fucking reason. Everything is held in order, precise, precision, with no intelligence, with nothing governing it, sounds ludicrous. And, when you think about uh, all the different things that has happened in this world, good and bad, and then exclude the facts that there is a power greater than yourself, as intelligent as you are, you've got to be one stupid son of a bitch. I mean, that's what I had to come to the conclusion about myself. I mean, you're a pretty smart guy, but you're fucking dumb to think that there is not something running it all. That everything is running at rapid speed for no good fucking reason. Okay, tell me this. So when man in his brilliance created the atomic bomb, and he was able to break an atom and create such an explosion of such magnitude, and with such a threat of chain reaction, why was it after a nuclear bomb had broke atom and electrons and things scattered from the explosion, why didn't it just continue and wipe out the whole planet? What was that stopped it? Because if nothing's running it all and everything's just a result of my actions, and I'm in complete control, or man is in complete control, what man had done should have fucked us all off with the breaking of the atom. It's hard to, I admit, get over the abuse a lot of us have suffered at the hands of religious people. And yet I'm in the dilemma that tells me nothing but a power greater than myself can help me. And so I'm left with two hard alternatives. One is to go on to the bitter end. Just say fuck it and stay fucked up as long as I can. And the other is to accept spiritual help. Well, I can't even accept spiritual help if I don't first have a solid realization as to the desperate situation I'm in all by myself. So let's talk about another unbeliever. On page 56. On page 56, this gentleman's name is Fitz Mayo. A lot of people who doesn't do their research thinks that this is Bill's story, but this isn't Bill's experience. Bill just told you he had always believed in a power greater than himself, but this guy didn't. Our friend was a minister's son. He attended church school, where he became rebellious at what he thought an overdose of religious education. For years thereafter, he was dogged by trouble and frustration, business failure, insanity, fatal illness, suicide. These calamities in his immediate family embittered and depressed him. Post-war disillusionment, ever more serious alcoholism, impending mental and physical collapse brought him to the point of self-destruction. One night, when confined in a hospital, he was approached by an alcoholic. Bill W. approached Mr. Fitz Mayo, was approached by an alcoholic who had known a spiritual experience. Our friend's gorge rose as he bitterly cried out, "If there is a God, he certainly hasn't done anything for me." But later, alone in his room, he asked himself this question: is it possible that all the religious people I have known are wrong? While pondering the answer, he felt as though he lived in hell. Then, like a thunderbolt, a great thought came. It crowded out all else. who are you to say there is no God? See, if you can still reserve your right to still say there is no God, that is an arrogance, that is a loftiness, that is a pride, that is a skepticism, that is a being puffed up that has to be deflated, or else the program doesn't work for you. You're stuck having to go get you something to drink or some dope. Okay, so this man, Mr. Mayo, was approached by a man who had had a spiritual experience, a man who was a confirmed alcoholic, who had had his problems solved, like you are being approached now by a man who is a confirmed real alcoholic and addict who has had his problems solved. And I'm telling you that God done for me what he can't do, what I can't do for myself. And I am not trying to push religion here. I'm trying to push that nothing apart from a power greater than yourself could restore you to sanity if you're the real alcoholic. So on page 55, at the top paragraph, it says, "Yet we have been seeing another kind of flight, a spiritual liberation from this world. People who rose above their problems. They said God made these things possible and we only smiled." In their arrogance, in their loftiness, in their skepticism, in their unbelief, in their pride, which has not been deflated, they only smiled. We had seen spiritual relief, but liked to tell ourselves it wasn't true. Well, a real alcoholic and a real addict better fucking hope it's true. Because if God ain't real, I'm fucked. And I don't have to have a clear understanding of who or what that power is. I just have to be willing to believe, which is to say, I just simply have to want whatever happened to you being recovered to happen to me being fucked. Being a real alcoholic and an addict, I am in the most trouble ever. And this is going to be repeated over and over again. Unless I have an entire psychic change, there's very little hope of my recovery. Or you can keep playing the game. Start back using, whoop that own ass, emerge remorseful, swear off again, not be comfortable in your own skin until it's so tremendous and so extreme that I have to fucking use again to experience a sense of ease and comfort that come at once. You can keep on doing the start, stop shit for the rest of your fucking life, which probably won't be that long, if that's what you so choose to do. Other than that, it's time being fucking whooped to consider somebody else's shit. Then it says, actually, we were fooling ourselves. For deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, but in some form or other it is there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup just as much as the feeling we have for a friend. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but he was there. He was as much a fact as we were. We found the great reality deep down within us. In the last analysis, it was only there that he may be found. It was so with us. So now we're finna branch off into this other area and put in check some of these middle of the road rooms. The big book did not give me permission to create a concept. The big book said that deep down in every man, woman, and child is the concept. And it's been blocked off by the bullshit. If somebody tells you you can use a doorknob as a higher power, that's the dumbest fucking shit ever. Fuck that. If somebody even gives you a way out to say that the group can be your higher power, that is the dumbest shit ever. No human power could have relieved my alcoholism. And 5, 6 of y'all, even though you're more powerful than me together, is not a power greater than myself that could restore me to sanity. You don't have the ability to make me okay in my own skin. You don't have it. The only way a doorknob can stop me from using is if you take that motherfucker apart, put it in a pillowcase, and beat my ass unconscious. How the fuck are you gonna be asking the doorknob to restore you to sanity? Get the fuck out of here. And then people are fallible, meaning we all have our flaws, meaning there's no way I could be your higher power. Even if I'm sponsoring you, I'm gonna keep checking that dumb shit. So being able to use my own conception is a statement of God's mercy. It is not a green light to create some shit. If I create a conception, the conception is no longer identified as my creator. The conception is simply my imagination. And besides that, the disease centers in my mind rather than in my body. So if I'm creating some shit in this sick ass state, it's as delusional as all the other shit I've come up with in this sickened state. All right, so let's go to page 92. The bottom paragraph. This is in the chapter Working with Others, but we're going to draw some more information concerning this. Use your own conception. We're going to draw some more information about what is the easier, softer way that doesn't work and what is the way that does work. So it says here, continue to speak of alcoholism as an illness, a fatal malady. We just recapped on step 1, the step 1 truth. The step 1 truth has nothing to do with me getting recovered. It has everything to do with this is repeated over and over, which means that if I've never had a psychic change as a result of the steps, meaning if I have never came in conscious contact with a power greater than myself, then I'm still in the cycle and I'm still headed back to the bar, to the dope house, which means I never got recovered simply because I stopped using. I have taken the very first steps in recovering, meaning now I can clear-headed consider seriously the information brought before me and possibly accept it, but I'm a long way away from getting recovered simply because I stopped using. So this guy is talking some pointers about working with a guy who may be atheist. So continue to speak of alcoholism as an illness, a fatal malady. Talk about the condition of the body and the mind which accompany it. Keep his attention focused mainly on your personal experience. Explain that many are doomed to never realize their predicament. Doctors are rightly loath to tell alcoholic patients the whole story unless it will serve some good purpose. But you may talk to him about the hopelessness of alcoholism because you offer a solution. So I'm talking to you about the hopelessness of alcoholism and addiction because I offer a solution. these people in the big book, the first 100, are talking about alcoholism because they offer a solution. So you're getting the whole truth about how fucked you are, apart from having a spiritual awakening, because we offer a solution. The doctors don't offer a solution. The psychiatrists have no solution for the problem we have. You will soon have your friend admitting he has many, if not all, of the traits of the alcoholic. So, recap. So, if when you honestly want to stop, you find you can't give it up entirely, or if when drinking you have very little control over the amount you take, you're probably alcoholic, which means you are suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience can conquer. Page 44 of the big book. If his own doctor is willing to tell him that he is alcoholic, so much the better. Even though your protege may not have entirely admitted his condition, he has become very curious to know how you got well. Let him ask you that question if he will. Tell him exactly what happened to you. Stress the spiritual feature freely. If the man be atheist or agnostic, make it emphatic that he does not have to agree with your conception of God. He can choose any conception he likes. You choosing any conception you like does not mean you get to create a conception. It means that there is conceptions of God already here and available, which have proven to deliver people from a hopeless state of mind and body. And you can choose either one of them conceptions you agree with, provided it makes sense to you. The main thing is that he be willing to believe in a power greater than himself and that he lives by spiritual principles. When dealing with such a person, you had better use everyday language to describe spiritual principles. There is no use arousing any prejudice he may have against certain theological terms and conceptions about which he may already be confused. Don't raise such issues no matter what your own convictions are. And I do indeed have my own convictions, and I have indeed made every attempt to not impose those convictions on you. In other words, I have a religious belief, and I have a religious leaning and learning that I wholeheartedly believe in and continue to learn about and grow in. And yet, I have not one time tried to throw that at you. I've tried to contend with the lies you still believe with truth. Nothing but truth, nothing but facts. All right. So when we get to this part as being atheist, agnostic, skeptic, you know, unbeliever, when we get to this part where we are of those who are of an intellectual pride, the facts about the situation I find myself in and my experience being trapped in the cycle of addiction generally whoops me into a state of reasonableness. I at least want to seriously consider what someone who has had the same trouble did to get recovered. Uh, it's not always an easy alternative. Uh, but my choices are either to go on to the bitter end or accept spiritual help. It comes down to either God is everything or he's nothing. He either is or he isn't. What's my choice to be? Now, let's get on to those people who have had religious training and learning. Let's get on to some of them people who have been a part of a church or religious leaning. And let's get down to some facts about them. Let's talk about Dr. Bob for a minute. On page 180 in Bob's story. On page 180, Dr. Bob here, first big paragraph of page 180 says, the question which might naturally come into your mind would be, and he's talking about Bill had met Bob. Bill had taken Bob through the steps. Bill had brought some information to Bob that helped him get recovered and stay recovered. And Bob was not an unbeliever, an atheist, a skeptic. And Bob had religious upbringings. And, well, let's just read it first. Here we go. What did the man do or say that was different from what others had done or said? It must be remembered that I had read a great deal and talked to everyone who knew or thought they knew anything about the subject of alcoholism. But this was a man who had experienced many years of frightful drinking, who had had most all the drunkard and drug addict experiences known to man, but who had been cured by the very means I have been trying to employ. That is to say, the spiritual approach. He gave me information about the subject of alcoholism, which was undoubtedly helpful. The information that Bill gave Bob was the doctor's opinion, the allergy, the cycle, the restless, irritable, and discontentedness after having stopped, the not being okay in your own skin. He gave him information that finally explained what his internal issue had been. Then he also shared the program of action with Bob that entailed making restitution and righting your wrongs. And if you recall anything about Dr. Bob's story, Bob went and made all his amends in one day because he found it necessary to clear the slate, to make right all the wrongs. He also shared with Bob the importance of carrying this message to other suffering alcoholics. So when Bob was already religious or had already believed in the power of God, he still had some potholes in a program of action that would restore him to sanity concerning drink. And so he gave me information about the subject of alcoholism, which was undoubtedly helpful. Of far more importance was the fact that he was the first living human with whom I had ever talked who knew what he was talking about in regards to alcoholism from actual experience. In other words, he talked my language. He knew all the answers, and it certainly wasn't because he had picked them up in his reading. Okay, so let's go to page 93. And, you know, I just want to give you a heads up that what I'm saying is not intended on attacking your religious preferences. Your religion, whatever it is, that's okay. It's your thing. It's okay. I want to point at you. And I want to point at what you haven't been doing. So the bottom paragraph on page 93 says, this is still working with others, your prospect may belong to a religious denomination. His religious education and training may be far superior to yours. In that case, he is going to wonder how you can add anything to what he already knows. But he will be curious to learn why his own convictions have not worked and why yours seem to work so well. He may be an example of the truth that faith alone is insufficient. To be vital, faith must be accompanied by self-sacrifice and unselfish constructive action. Let him see that you are not there to instruct him in religion. Admit that he probably knows more about it than you do, but call to his attention the fact that however deep his faith and knowledge, he could not have applied it or he would not drink. Perhaps your story will help him see where he has failed to practice the very precept he knows so well. Okay, so here comes the part. It says, admit that he probably knows more about it than you do. So now we're about to talk about my story a little bit. I'm not about to sit here and admit you probably know more about religion than I do. Out of the 9 trips to prison, at least 7 of those stays, the entire stay, every single day, I sought spiritual help through the scriptures. Theologically, I'm probably really close to being what would be called a scholar. I studied the text, the biblical text, in all of the dead languages: Aramaic, Hebrew, Chaldean, Greek, some Latin, and every single day, all day long, wouldn't read anything other than it. Chased the history of the faith as far back as I could through male school, communicating with different ministers, scholars, theologians, studying writings by world-renowned saints. And so I'm not going to sit here and tell you that your religious learnings are superior to mine. I'm just going to go ahead and admit that as learned as I am in my religious preference, it didn't fucking work. I would get out and I would still not be okay in my own skin, and I, against my will and against my religious learnings, would use again. And so that brings me to the point of asking you the question. If you're so dependent upon the efforts you make to keep religious ritual practices and laws, and you're so very proud of that and content in that, I'm not telling you to stop doing that. What I'm telling you is to ask yourself the question of why the fuck it ain't worked yet. Because it's not your religion that's fucked up. It's you. You still think and believe in your ability and your efforts to collect information and to practice that faith outwardly. The way you go about your faith is predominantly an outward act, a performance. You fake as fuck. It's an inside job, which means that I had spent so much time learning about God, so much time studying those things about God and about the religion that I didn't know God himself. And that was my dilemma. And that's where I found myself. And that's when I had to learn the set aside prayer. And I had to set aside what I thought I already knew about God, what I thought I already knew about these steps, this work, about myself, and ask God himself to reveal himself to me, because I finally experienced complete deflation where everything I all by myself had tried had failed. I finally conceded that I needed him, himself, and I needed to experience him and the power that only he himself could relate to me. And so I need to tell you, there's great validity and truth and facts in the religions. Many people have received salvation. Many people have received deliverance. Many people have received enlightenment. Many people have secured a relationship in God through these faiths. And I do not mean to knock any of them. That's not my intention. My intention is to expose the arrogance of the alcoholic. Self will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. On page 87, the big book says, be quick to see where religious people are right and make use of what they have to offer, which goes to say they're on to something. I personally don't like religious people. Has a lot to do with some of the resentments I had to resolve. Has a lot to do with some of the abuse I had suffered in the hands of religious people. And so I had to let the religious people off the hook so that I could let God off the hook. And then once I established a relationship with God, then it allowed me to forgive the religious people for being human and still being fallible and falling short. And so at a later date, it's hard to say that they were right. God is real and he is able. I still have an apprehensiveness when dealing with religious people because they seem to not need to be as directly involved with a power greater than themselves than I do. Because their symptoms of their selfishness and self-centeredness doesn't take them to the dope house or the bar. It just makes them very ugly people. And they don't tend to self-destruct like I do. So I let them off the hook and let them be simply human, which means I let myself simply be human. And I let myself off the hook. But I get the point as to how necessary it is for me to get in touch with God. That's the whole purpose of the book, is to get me in touch with a power greater than myself, which would restore me to sanity, which would solve my problems. Page 45. Okay, so here's the situation we find ourselves in. Hopelessly addicted, hopelessly alcoholic, and there is no help for me apart from divine help. And I got a fucking problem with God at this particular point, right? And so, but I'm starting to ingest some hard truths about the situation I'm in, and these truths make me, to some degree, willing to consider. So we needed to ask ourselves but one simple question: do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe in a power greater than myself? And if I'm sitting here and I'm talking to a person who have recovered, who have solved the drinking and drugging problem, and they say God did it, and I'm looking at alcoholic and drug addict destruction, then I at least want to consider that maybe, just maybe, what happened to them can happen to me if I follow the precise instructions as outlined in this book to get me in touch with a power greater than myself. And so the willingness to believe means that I want to believe. I may not believe and I may not understand it, but I want to believe because I don't want to die an alcoholic addict death. I don't want to continue simply existing. I don't want to continue suffering in my own skin. And I don't want to continue this superficial ass program of recovery that has me recovering, threatened to relapse any fucking minute for the rest of my damn life because I'm still not okay in my own skin. I want what is true, what is whole, and what is real. So if you look back over, well, when I look back over my past, I recall many encounters with religious people, and their statement, simply put, was always that God was the answer. And these people said that from all different faiths. They all said the same thing. And I cringed. Then I believed them and I went about it in my own efforts to acquire the collective knowledge about those faiths. And that alone was not the equivalent of knowing God. And so those people were right, is what I came to believe. The weird thing is, here is the believers telling me this whole time that I need God. And now we got the unbelievers telling me the only thing that'll help me or solve my problem is God. Dr. William Silkworth, on the Doctor's Opinion, page XXVIII in the 4th edition, says, the message which can interest and hold these alcoholic people must have depth and weight. In nearly all cases, their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than themselves if they are to recreate their lives. Then you have a gentleman by the name of Carl Jung, a celebrated physician in Europe, who treated Mr. Roland Hazard III. And when he diagnosed Roland Hazard III as being the hopeless variety alcoholic, Roland Hazard ended up asking him, were there any exceptions to the rule? So on page 27, there is a solution, is the name of the chapter. On page 27, it starts off by saying, some of our alcoholic readers may think they can do without spiritual help. Let us tell you the rest of the conversation our friend had with his doctor. The doctor said, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I have never seen one single case recover where that state of mind exists to the extent that it does in you. I've never seen one single case recover where they were as alcoholic as you are. Our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. He said to the doctor, is there no exceptions? Yes, the doctor replied. There is exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since earlier times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. In fact, I have been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangements within you. With many individuals, the methods which I employ are successful, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description. So an alcoholic of my description, the unbeliever, the intellect, the skeptic, the doctor, the psychiatrist, the clinical approach has not been successful with an alcoholic of my variety. Listen to the rest of this right quick and then I'll close it up. It says, upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for he reflected that after all, he was a good church member. Right? This goes out to all those people who are very religious and they still can't stay sober. You reflect that you're a very good church member and your religious learnings are very extensive, and yet you can't fucking stay sober. And so here comes the time where a person has to dumb it down in order to get a hold of something that'll really work. This hope, however, was destroyed by the doctor telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, in his case, they did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience. So, to tell you more about Rowland Hazard, he ends up leaving Europe, coming back to the United States, crossing paths with Bill W. and Dr. Bob, working the 6 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is now the 12 steps of the 6 steps of the Oxford group, which is now the 12 steps of the Alcoholics Anonymous group, and he recovered never to drink again. So, what am I saying to you? I'm saying it's as simple as being honest, open, and willing to consider something other than what you've been using. I'm saying that you don't have to be religious, and I'm also saying that if you are religious, you do not have to throw your religion away. What I'm saying is I needed something far more pointed and precise. I needed to know a power greater than myself for myself, and it had to be a personal spiritual experience. Anything less than that was not sufficient. And so, having dumbed it down, having had to set aside my own religious beliefs and my religious learnings to get down to raw spiritual approach, the principles laid out in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, I had a spiritual awakening that made my religious learnings come alive and made my prior experiences with recovery, those things that were genuine, be validated, and those things that weren't genuine and that were not useful discredited. So if when you honestly want to, you find you can't give it up entirely, or if when drinking you have very little control over the amount you take, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer, which only coming to know a power greater than yourself for yourself will conquer, which only a psychic change will free you from the cycle. And I hope that I've given you enough truth to disturb your lie. But I hope that I haven't said it to you in such a way that it offends you and closes you off. My only hope is to be useful. My only hope is to help those who suffer from what I suffer from come to know a power greater than themselves for themselves and them be freed. And I, of course, hope that they would in turn do the same thing and try to help other people. This has been Real Raw and Recovered. I love you guys. I hope you can get a hold of this thing. Take your time and take it serious. God bless.